We're going to cover what a family trust is, why you might want to set one up or not, and if you've got a family trust, how you get the most out of it. And I welcome questions throughout. If you've got any, sometimes it's easy just to address stuff right then and then. So, in terms of what a family trust is, so it's basically a separate arrangement as to how to own stuff. Okay, so it's separate from you and yourself. So you may own your home, you might have the car, and the money in the bank, and because you own all those things personally, they are exposed to certain risks. There are certain implications of owning them personally. What a family trust does is that it creates a separate ownership structure, if you like, separate from yourself, that you can transfer ownership of assets to and get the benefit of you not actually owning them. So, involved in the family trust are three general classes of people. There's the settlors, the people who set it up, and in this case it's I'll just refer to them as the mum and dad. There's the trustees. These are the people who are responsible for the day-to-day administration of the trust. They decide whether to buy this property or that property, whether to bank this bank or that bank, whether to invest in this company or these shares. And generally speaking, if you're just talking about a private family trust, this usually includes the mum and dad as well. And typically an independent trustee as well. It's not a requirement, but in most trust deeds, but it's certainly advisable in the community to have an independent trustee. It just makes this thing look a whole lot separate from this thing here, right? If it ever came under scrutiny or got any pressure put on you from creditors, then they'll be looking at whether or not, and you say, no, my house is owned by my family trust, they'll be looking to see whether or not this thing is actually run by a trust, run properly, whether the trustees have been meeting their duties as trustees. So as trustees, there are certain duties that you have. It's almost like having another capacity, wearing a different hat. You've got certain responsibilities associated with that. Trusts get into problem when people forget that they are a trustee and they have certain responsibilities and they simply treat these assets as though they are their own. Finally, there's the beneficiaries. So the trustees hold and they manage the trust assets for the benefit of the beneficiaries, who include mum and dad themselves, and usually their children and their grandchildren. And you can have other people in there, but generally you would want to have the beneficiaries quite close and close to you. Beneficiaries have the right to be considered when the trustees are deciding how to perhaps make distributions to beneficiaries. They also have the right to certain information about the trust. So you don't want to have the neighbour, or even the sibling, the brother, the niece, the nephew, their spouse and partner. Some of the older trustees include, mum and dad, their kids, their nieces and nephews, grandkids, any children of the nieces and nephews, the spouse or de facto partners of the nieces and nephews, and all of that. So, in more modern trustees, you see that it's kept fairly tight. So, any questions around what a family trust is?
Does the individual trustee have access to what the beneficiaries get from it, or are they just like a paid entity?
The individual trustees. So, can you repeat that?
So you know how you say you've got the mum and dad, for example.
Yep.
And then to make it professional, you have an individual.
The independent. Sorry.
Yeah, independent. Are they just like for example, if I hire
they
you,
can be
my independent trustee?
Yeah. So they are independent in the sense that they are not a beneficiary of this thing.
Okay.
And so they could be the lawyer, they could be the accountant, they could be a trusted friend. Somebody who it's generally worthwhile having somebody who has experience with trusts and what and trustee duties and how to discharge those. Yep. Any other questions there? Cool. Okay, so the way you form a trust is that you sign a trust deed. So the set laws, the people setting it up, and the trustees sign a trust deed. It's a 20-page document setting out the rules of the trust. It says what the trust name is, it says who the set laws are, who the trustees are, who the beneficiaries are. It sets out the time frame for the trust. So at the moment you can only have a trust that lasts, in general, 80 years. That's going to change in January 2021 with the new Trusts Act coming into play. That from then onwards you can have a trust that lasts for 125 years. Yeah, trusts aren't registered like companies are. You can go to the company's office, company's register and search all the companies in New Zealand, see who's the directors, shareholders, etc. For trusts, there's no registration of trusts. So, by estimates, there's around maybe 400,000 to 500,000 trusts in New Zealand. So they're quite a popular tool it used to protect the assets and the like. Cool.
Dan, question about
please.
the name of the trust.
Yep.
So you said it's not on a register. Does that mean that there can be 1,000 Smith family trusts? It
Correct.
doesn't have to be like an individual name?
There could be 1,000.
Okay.
There are probably more than 1,000 Smith family trusts. You basically just have to have. It usually ends with the word trust. You don't have to have family in it. It could be the Smith Trust. It could be the D&P Smith Family Trust. Yep. So the name is. It is nowhere. The name you choose could be the very same as somebody else's. Yeah. Cool. It doesn't have to have the family name in it. Some people just call it the lemon tree trust because there's a nice lemon tree on the property, and it's Cool. Cool. Okay. So that's what a family trust is. We're going to turn now to reasons why you might want to establish a family trust. There are a lot of people that have family trusts that don't actually need them, in my view, because they are popular. Well, back in the day, certainly in the 90s, 2000s, they were popular. Maybe the neighbour got one or the work colleague got one, and they feel that they, you had to go get your own. So it's important that you have your why. Otherwise, you go to the expense of setting this thing up and the ongoing costs of maintaining it for little benefit. So I've got here 8 reasons to establish family trust. I've made a note down the bottom here. Reasons 7 and 8 are not valid reasons alone to form a family trust, but can be incidental benefits of having one. So we will cover those, and there are some real benefits there, but the real sort of reasons for having a family trust, in my view, anyway, are reasons 1 to 6. They come under to protect your assets, and also the second one is to direct how you want your assets managed, either during your lifetime or after you pass away. So let's go through each of those. So number 1 is to protect your assets against claims from creditors. If you, now this is probably the most common reason why people set up a family trust is to protect from creditors, and it's for those that are in business on their own. If you're in paid employment or you're retired, then you're not taking on the risk of the business, you're just turning up, getting paid, and the like. But if you are a business owner, then there are certain risks associated with that. So we'll just briefly sort of talk about that. So let's just use the example where, okay, is it the speaker? It's the
that's the aircon.
That's background music. Okay, so we've got the couple here. They have a business. They're the directors of the business. They have to lease some space, and so therefore the company enters into a lease with the landlord Now the landlord is going to want the personal guarantees from the directors of the company in that situation. So if the business goes belly up and it can't meet the obligations under the lease, then the landlord is going to come after the directors personally to meet that obligation. And so that therefore exposes any assets that the individuals own personally to that risk, such as if they own the home or the money in the bank, etc. If they did not own the family home, and so this is where a trust comes in, so say they formed a trust, they no longer own that, they transferred the house across to here, that doesn't make the risk of the landlord coming knocking on your door go away, but it does mean that it protects the house from exposure to that risk. So worst case scenario, it's a significant liability, the company failed, they don't have other funds to pay up the landlord. Worst case is the landlord could bankrupt them, the official assignee steps in and realises any assets of theirs to satisfy that claim from the landlord. And if the house is owned by the trust and has been properly run and all of that, then yes, they could be bankrupted, but they've still got a roof over their head. That's the general idea of how trusts are used to protect your assets from claims against creditors. That could be a supplier to the business. There'd be a personal guarantee given to the supplier for materials, services, whatever that they supply to the business. If the business can't meet those obligations, the supplier could come after the individuals under the personal guarantee. So that may or may not resonate with you, depending on what your situation is. Any questions on that?
Can the trust own a business, or does the business own the trust? Which way around does that go?
Usually, okay. So if these guys own the business, so if there's a business involved, these guys are the directors. What is of value? So that and the business owns assets, it owns stock, etc., etc. The shares are what is the real value of the business. If the assets of the business exceed its liabilities, and if there's a trading history, then there's some value in these shares. That's just like any other asset, and so that could be owned by them personally, or if they're of value, it could be owned by the trust. And so if they own personally, it's much like the house being exposed to that risk, versus if those shares were owned by the trust. So what would happen? Often it's what is common to have, say, 98% of the shares owned by the family trust, and 1% him, 1% her. And that's the reason why that's fairly common is the accountant at the end of the tax year likes the ability to be able to shareholder salary to the individuals, and you need to own shares to be able to receive that. But the bulk of the value of the shares is owned by the trust. So the family trust can own shares, it can own the money if there's significant monies invested. Those could be transferred to the trust, and likewise. Basically, the trust creates like a silo which protects assets from risks that otherwise would be exposed if they were owned here. Cool. So that's number one. Number two, to protect the assets from possible relationship property claims. So this is in a situation where, say, he passes away, she gets into another relationship. They both live in, and we're just assuming for a moment that she still owns the home. Say if the home was owned jointly, he dies, she now owns the whole thing. She gets into a new relationship, they both live in the home. The relationship property laws that we have say that after 3 years, he's entitled to half of it, even though she is still the legal owner of it. So if and when they split or the relationship ends, and it will end either separation or death, he's entitled to half of the home. Now, if the house is owned in a trust, they both can still live in the house, but there's no automatic after 3 years he's entitled to half. That only applies in a situation where she owns the house and they both live in it, not in trust property. There are, yeah.
So you've got any time right up until the 3rd year date to put it into the trust, right? I'm just thinking of my brother now.
Yeah, yeah, and so it's not necessarily the marriage date. You know, there's plenty of de facto relationships going on. So it's when they started to live together as a couple. That's when the clock starts to tick. And yeah, but look, if say they got to 2 years, 364 days, and the relationship ends, either they separate or even one of them passed away. In fact, when one of them passes away and it's not 3 years, there is separate rules apply. Basically, they just treat it as though it was 3 years, because the intent was, you know, that they would still live there. But if they separated, it would be a marriage or a relationship of short duration. There are separate rules for that. It really depends on the circumstances. It depends on how much contribution they both made to the assets. Yeah. You know, and some people ask, you know, okay, 3 years, what if I was in a relationship for 18 months and then we split, we reconciled 2 years later for you know, another 18 months, does that count? And so the courts do have the ability to look at all of the circumstances and look at all the relationships, even though none of them individually were over 3 years, and make a call as to what is fair. Yeah, even if the property was owned in a trust, the new spouse, say if they've been paying the mortgage or the rates, or they help fund the new deck or the new bedroom or the new bathroom or the pool, and they separated, even though they're not entitled to a 50-50 split, they still would be entitled to compensation for whatever they put into the family home. Yeah. What's the easy fix there? So so a trust is not the only answer to protect against a claim from this person here. What's the easy fix? Huh? No?
Like a prenuptial thing?
Yeah, a prenuptial. And so a prenuptial agreement is actually the more direct way to manage that risk, which it basically says, these are my assets, those are your assets, anything we build up together, great, they're ours. If we separate or one of us passes away, I'll keep those, you keep those, and we'll split these 50-50. That's sort of generally how it works.
Can
So,
you still do a prenup if you're not married?
yeah, so de facto couples, yep, can do a prenuptial agreement. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep, so, yeah, and if you did a prenuptial, then provided it's all signed properly, there's certain rules around it being enforceable that need to be met, but that's the more direct way to manage that risk from a claim from a spouse against, say, the family home. Some people still have a trust for that reason, to protect against relationship property claims, but they also at the same time maybe enter into one of those, maybe there's other assets. Yeah. Okay. And the final point under protect is to ensure some assets such as the family batch, business or farm are transferred and taken to the next generation. So if say they had the family batch, and you know there were 6 kids. When they both pass away, ordinarily what would happen is that would be divided 6 ways, and that would get a bit messy in terms of, you know, ownership and who is the use of, replacing the roof and maintenance, repairs, etc. And yeah, and so, and one owner could force the sale of it if they really wanted to. And so if you wanted to make sure that some assets were maintained intact for the family, then transfer them to a family trust. When these guys both pass away, the family trust still owns the asset, and the kids can still benefit of it by virtue of being beneficiaries. The trustees will decide who pays for what and the like. This reason is often used by farmers in setting up family trusts. You know, the farm might be so big, but it's not economic to divide it into 6 shares. Divided into 6 shares is not economic to run a small farm, right? And it's only economic as a big piece of dirt with the sheds on it. And so farmers often use family trusts to ensure that the wealth of the farm is available for the benefit of everybody, rather than it getting fragmented by ownership upon these two passing away. Any questions on that? Cool, okay. The next 3 questions are reasons really around directing. So number 4, to manage assets on behalf of somebody who is unable to manage their own affairs. So this really is around, it could be with the aged or the infirm, or through disability. Someone can't manage their own affairs. A trust is one vehicle to use to help manage the asset on that person's behalf. Also, on this reason here, a client of mine, she's a single lady, she's got a son. She doesn't trust her son inheriting her assets upon her passing away. He's got issues in terms of, he's got addictions and the like. If she were to pass away and he were to inherit the house, it would be gone. To her thought. So one way to manage that is she formed a trust, transferred the house into it, and she can still live in it during her lifetime by virtue of being a beneficiary. But when she passes away, it's available for the son to live in it. He's got a roof over his head, his basic needs met, but he hasn't actually got control over the asset. He can't sell it and the like.
So it's really important to choose really good trustees, eh?
It is, yeah, yep, yeah. It is, yes, it is, especially if you, upon you passing away, it's important to consider who you want to have control over this thing. So, in a typical situation, when you look at this and you look at, okay, who's got control of this thing? Some people say, well, the trustees must do, because they decide what happens for the trust, but really it's the people who have got the power to appoint and remove the trustees. And in most modern trustees, it's the set laws. So the husband's got the power to appoint one trustee, and he's deemed to have appointed himself. The wife likewise appointed herself, and jointly they've got the power to appoint an independent trustee. In your will, that's a power that you can deal with, that should be addressed in your will. So this is when you've got a trust. So in that person's will, it'll be saying, I give my power to appoint and remove trustees to my wife. But if she's not around, I give that to, if you trust the kids, they're the kids that are 20 years of age or older, and if more than one, they can have it, and they can share it.
Does that open that power to be contested in the will?
Contested.
Or challenged, or
It's,
in some way?
it is, no, not usually. So in the trust deed, it will say, one of the things in the trust deed, it will say that this guy's got the power. They've each got one power, and they can transfer it to whoever they like during their lifetime or in their will. And that's simply what they're doing. In their will, they're exercising that power to transfer their power of appointment. And so it's all been done in accordance with the trust deed. So the trust deed will, I don't know, explain it, but the trust deed sets out the rules as to how this thing is operated.
So the
And that's just
son
simply
can't
one of the rules.
say in this situation, the son can't come along and say, oh no, I want that,
Yeah,
I want to be a trustee.
it should have been
So
me.
yeah, it should have been me.
Yeah.
And he can't challenge
No. It's
So
no. Well,
yes.
they could. The son could try and claim that mum didn't have capacity when she signed the will and try and make the will invalid, or but all other things being equal, assuming that it's a valid will, mum had capacity and all of that. No, it's not usually a power or that power to transfer it to somebody else, other than the son who feels like he's been left out. No, that's not something that is ordinarily challenged.
Yeah, so he can't gain control of the trust in the house that way.
No.
He'd have no footing, he'd have nothing to stand on.
So this woman who's
Yes.
on her own,
Yep.
so she would have to say in her will who the next trustee would
That's
be.
right.
Okay.
That's
You
right.
get to name the person.
Yeah, you do, and so that's an important consideration specifically for if you're on your own.
Yeah.
Because if you're in a married situation, you've got kids, easy. To the other, when the other dies, then to the kids equally. But if it's you, and you've got kids, presumably if you trust your kids, it'll go to them. If you don't, then you might need to just start thinking about who you trust with that power. Like in the situation of that client of mine who had the son that she wanted to make sure his needs were met, but he didn't. But she didn't feel comfortable with giving him control of the asset.
What happens in that situation when he passes on? Does it
There's-
go to an estate or?
There is provision for if he does have kids, and he doesn't at the moment, but if he's got kids, then the kids will inherit. But if he passes away, and
Or becomes a deceased estate or something?
it says, I think in her case, so she's nominated some charities that she wants to benefit. Yeah. Just to clarify, so when you do a will, that only deals with what you own personally. People who have a trust often have a very small estate, or a will that deals with not much, because they don't own much personally. They own their pots and pans, they own the car, but their major assets are over here. And so, that's an important thing to remember. Just wills deal with what you own personally, and the trustee deals with, and also this other document which is common, a memorandum of guidance, which is from these guys, addressed to the trustees from time to time, as to why they set this thing up and how they want it administered, and also gives directions around when we're not here, these are our wishes. And it generally says, when we're not here, wind the thing up, distribute it out to the three kids, and let them get on with their own lives. Yeah.
So then if you have a business, it's wise and prudent to, if you've got a house and you want to protect it from anything happening with the business, put it into a trust,
Yeah, I think you really need to assess the risks associated with the business. Like if you are, like if you're a hairdresser, you're not, if you are a hairdresser operating from home, you're not going to have obligations to the landlord. Supplies, you probably just pay them up front in your own cash. There's not a lot that could really go wrong that would threaten, the home. We've got ACC here, so if you end up cutting their ear, they'll go to the hospital. They can't bring a claim against you. We're not in America. Maybe if we're in America, then maybe. So like I would even assess and consider, well, what's the nature of the risk? Is it minimal? If not, maybe a trust is a way to protect it from those risks.
How much does it cost to set up a trust?
Yeah, so to set up a trust and to transfer, say, the family home across, to update your wills, because when you set up a trust, you need your wills updated. It's around, say, $2,500 to $3,500. Yeah, that's why trusts are oversold, because they're a good source of income
Yeah.
for lawyers. And it's, yeah, that's my genuine belief on that. So it's important to have a why.
Honest lawyer.
Yeah, yeah. It's important to have a why before you set up a family trust. Yeah. Okay. To manage the risk of someone such as a child challenging your will. So you've got the 6 kids. You never really did like that 6th one. And they're always difficult, and you've been estranged from them for 30 years, you know? And they told you blank to your face, I don't want anything to do with you. Or even, look, you may have adopted them, and so legally they're yours, but hey, they've found themselves and they don't want anything to do with you. And so if you, in your will, if you say, all right, I'm writing you out of my will, that's all well and good, but your will leaves it to the 5. In fact, I'll just say 3. Three. Yep, 1, 2, 3. You leave half here, half here, and they say, hey, well, that's not fair. I mean, I'm a child of yours too. They could bring a claim under the Family Protection Act, it's called, and challenge your will. And courts generally would be willing to give them between 10 and 20% of your estate. That's a very general rule. That's even though your will said they get nothing, 50%, 50%. It depends on the relationship, it depends on the amount of assets you've got, but they have a claim under what we call the FPA. It's an FPA claim against your will. If you don't have a house owned here, but you have a family trust and your major assets here, they still have a claim under the Family Protection Act, but against what?
Just what it was in
This,
yeah.
the pots and pans, the car, the whatever. And your trust can direct your trustees, usually via this memorandum of guidance, to say, once I've gone, everything to these 2. In that case, you want to make sure that that 3rd child is not a beneficiary of your trust, because there's rights associated with just being beneficiaries. Look, that's a reason why some people set up trusts. It's probably not valid for any of you. Hopefully we try and nurture these eternal relationships.
If they are beneficiaries, are you able to, like on that example, are you able to then cut them off? Before if anything happens, you can remove them?
So it all comes back to the trustee. The trustee sets out the rules of the trust, and the trustee ordinarily, like a good modern trustee would say, that while you're both alive, you can add people to, and you can take people away from being out of this beneficiary pool. It usually says once one of you pass away, the beneficiary pool is locked. You can't add people to or take people away. Yeah.
But prior to that, you
Prior to that you can, but again it depends on the trustees. Some trustees don't lock the beneficiary pool after one of them passes away. The reason why people, like in more modern trustees, the beneficiary pool gets locked when one of these guys passes away is if say he passed away and she gets into a new relationship and he's got the 6 kids, there could be pressure which could come on her to appoint new beneficiaries, bring them on, and bring his kids on. But the rationale is that these assets were built up by these guys for their kids, and not to be shared with any new spouse or partner. Okay. Number 6, to provide flexibility when your children inherit following your passing. So this, if you own all your assets personally, the thing that triggers distribution to your kids of the inheritance is your heart stopping, right? Or you die and then you have to wait a period, but when you die, that's when they inherit. Now, they may be in a good space or not in terms of their relationship with a spouse, in terms of business creditors, addictions. So they get a $200,000 inheritance paid to them. They may waste it on whatever. They may put it into the family home to pay off the joint mortgage, and then 6 months later, the spouse leaves them, in which case they'll walk away with basically half of the value. And so this last one sort of allows you to rule from the grave, so to speak, in terms of the timing as to when your children inherit. It gives these trustees their discretion around when your children receive their inheritance, if you like, from the trust. And if they have got creditors knocking on their door, that's probably not a good time for them to receive a $200,000 inheritance because, or if they're in an unstable relationship, they themselves may say, no, don't pay me, but it's already vested in them by virtue of you passing away, and the will is saying, distribute. So that's reason number 6. If you don't, if you can't really point to any of those 6 reasons, then a family trust probably is not for you. Other lawyers would tell you otherwise, but in my experience, that's pretty much the main reasons why you have a family trust. Now, these other 2 reasons, before I go into those, if you find that those 6 reasons are not for you, then there still is room to get the benefit of protecting assets and putting things in order by doing a will and enduring powers of attorney. When I mentioned this, I wrote this up last time, I said, people come, say, hey, they want to do a will or I want to do a trust. What they're really after is an estate plan that kicks in when it's needed to. And the basic estate plan is a will and enduring powers of attorney. So in my view, everyone should have that. The optional extras, which may or may not be relevant, are a trust, a family trust, and the choice of how you own your property. And the main options here are jointly or in shares, such as 50-50. And I'll talk a little bit about that on this next point. So, to potentially qualify for a residential care subsidy, anyone have the joy of putting their parents through a rest home or a loved one and having to qualify for a residential care subsidy? No, you probably get there. But the residential care subsidy is free money from the government that helps pay for your care in the event that you've been assessed as needing rest home level care. And so there are a number of conditions around that. It's free money, the government's not going to give it away. It only gives it to those that are poor. And poor means $235,000. So that's the asset threshold. So, and the situation I'm explaining with these numbers is if, say, the husband's passed away and the wife's alive, and she now needs to go into rest home. So you'll apply for a residential care subsidy. They'll ask, what assets do you own? And you'll say, you've got the family home. Now, if they owned it jointly, meaning they both own the whole thing, when he passes away, joint property automatically goes to the survivor, so she will own the whole thing. So, okay, she's got a $600,000 house. Okay, the government will say, that's great, sorry, but you're too rich. You need to pay for your care until your assets whittle down to the threshold. So we're at $1,000 a week, $50,000 a year. She's 7 years away from getting the subsidy. She's not going to last 7 years in a rest home. Most people only last 18 months or, 18 months, 2 years. If they need rest home level care, they're already, sort of on their way out. If you own the property in a family trust and it's been there for years, and it's been run properly, when she goes and applies for a residential care subsidy, she'll say, and they'll ask, what assets do you own? Well, yeah, the money, the pots and pans, the whatever, is valued at 50,000. And they'll say, okay, yep, you're under the threshold, therefore we're going to give you the subsidy. Yeah, that's how a family trust could potentially qualify you for a residential care subsidy if and when you need it.
How many years is it, Dan?
Yeah, so if you're going to set this thing up in your 40s, early 50s max, because there's a process of getting the property from here to here. If you could, so you could qualify for the subsidy if you're 65. If every 64-year-old all of a sudden went and set up a family trust, transferred all the assets across, then the Ministry of Social Development call that deprivation of assets. So you can only gift $27,000 of assets per year. So you need enough time to get the asset out of your asset schedule. So say if you're 50 years, and you've got a $600,000 home. Okay, so this here goes up by CPI or inflation every 1 July, so this slowly creeps up. But if in 2019 you transferred your $600,000 home to your trust, it would owe you a debt back of $600,000. So this has to be at market value. The property will continue to go up in value next year with 620, 630, 640. But this year it stays at 600, and you would gift off $27,000 a year.
Could you only gift one individual, or if there's you as a couple, you can do 27 each?
For the purpose of the residential care subsidy, they view it's a $27,000 allowance per application. If you're married, the application is a joint application, and so it takes into account the gifting of both. So if you did $27,000 each per year, it would be $54,000. Any gifting over and above the allowable annual limit is clawed back for the purpose of assessing how much assets you have. I'm getting pretty technical here, but look, in sort of short story, one option is to transfer your house across here, over here, 600,000, and then for you simply to say, trust, don't worry about the 600, I'm just going to forgive it.
Oh, okay.
And you gift the entire thing in 2019. In 2030, when you go into care, and assuming you're going to answer the questions honestly, they'll ask you, have you ever gifted assets away? And you say, yes, in 2019 I gifted my $600,000 house. They will allow you the $27,000, but they'll claw back everything over and above the 27. So they'll claw back $573,000 into your asset schedule for the purpose of assessing your assets. $573,000 is over the threshold. In 2030, that'll be up to $250, but it's still going to be over, so therefore you don't qualify. So if you want to try and use a trust for the purpose of residential care, better qualifying for it, you need to have enough life left in you to be gifting off these $27,000 a year. If you're 50, to get, so the gap between here and here is 370 or 65, so that's around 10 years would be 270. So it's around sort of 15 years, not quite, maybe 14 years of gifting. If you're 50, you've got 14 years left in you.
That's if you're by yourself. If you're with a couple.
Yes, like I'm just saying, me and my wife decide to put our house in there, and we have to gift it over that amount of time.
Yeah.
Do we do 27,000 each?
If the sole reason is you applying for a residential care subsidy, then you would only be doing 27 to 20 years, 13 and a half each.
And if it's for business and all that at the
Yeah,
same time?
if your reason is to set up for this,
Yeah,
you'd want to get that whole thing across in one go in 2019.
okay.
Because if there's any debt owing back to you, and this goes horribly wrong, the official assignee knocks on your door and bankrupts you, they can claw back any money owing to you as an asset of yours. So they'll be able to claw back or call on. You know, if you haven't forgiven that 600, that's an amount owing to you as an asset available to meet your creditors. So,
So
if you got one of
have
these
those reasons, then it's good.
if that's your reason, you want to gift off the whole thing, but you're basically closing the door of residential care subsidies if you do that.
Even if it's, 20 years prior to you needing a subsidy, they don't.
The question is, have you
retrospect
ever gifted any assets? Full stop.
Oh, okay.
And again,
And if it's yes, and that 20-year period, because of business, and that 20-year period has gone, and you've gone and met that 14 year, you should be all right.
Yep. But if during the course of this you get a claim coming knocking on your door, the extent to which you haven't gifted is exposed to that risk. Yeah. Sweet. So look, I think that's probably that's I'll just do 1 minute on this last point if you wanted to. So if you've got a rental, let's just say an example I use is they earn 80,000 and let's just say the other spouse doesn't work. This earns $10,000 of income per year, so that should be split half and half. Okay, so just to get a bit of context, the income tax rate's 10.5% on the first 17,000 is what you pay. So any income you earn up to there gets taxed at that rate. And then the next level, look, I think it's, I don't know exactly what it is, I think it's 48,000. At $70,000 it gets to 33, the highest. The trustee tax rate is 33% as well. But this $5,000 each, 5 to here, 5 to here, that 5k should be taxed at 33 cents because he's over that. That 5k will be taxed at this because she's under that. If that rental income was owned, if the rental was owned here and there was 10k of profit coming in, the trustees could decide to tax it at 33 cents in the trustee rate, or they could decide to distribute the entire thing to her, and the whole thing get taxed at her marginal tax rate, which in this case is 10.5%. So there is the ability to get some tax savings for rental income. Or it could be,
can you choose any of the beneficiaries?
You could. So if you've got a university student that needs fees paid, and you've done the kind of thing as a parent, and you're offered to pay their fees, rather than use your fully taxed income to pay their fees. If you've got income producing assets here, you could simply distribute that income to them. They get taxed at their marginal rate, and they use that to pay their fees, which is an exercise the accountant will do at the end of the tax year. Yeah.
And then can you change it as they graduate university and get more money?
Yeah. Well, as they work, then they'll move up the levels. If they're over 70, then there's no. You might as well tax it here. Or,
so if you have a few rentals and you're getting 100k, you can split amongst your 6 kids?
16 years or older. So if they're 16 years or under, then it's a deemed 33%. Otherwise, everyone would pay. Your kids will be millionaires. But if they're 16 years or older, then it's their marginal tax rate, which is 16, 17, 18, 19, 20 until they start earning.
Okay.
One thing I haven't mentioned is life interest will. So like a lot of you might be thinking, okay, well I know a family trust is not for me now, but a life interest will, if the residential care subsidy is what you're concerned about, is that you sever the joint ownership of the house so it's a half share each, 50%. So so rather than owning it jointly, you own it 50-50. When he passes away, she doesn't automatically inherit his half share. Rather, his will simply says she can live in this share, but she doesn't own it. So when she goes into care, she gets asked the question, what assets do you own? And she says, 300,000. And so, yes, she'll have to pay for her care for 18 months, but it's basically protecting
The rest of it.
$300,000 from residential care costs. And that's it's a fairly popular and I think effective way to protect at least half, get yourself in a better position to qualify for a residential care subsidy, just simply by severing the joint ownership into half share each. Alright? I know it's probably too much, hey? Too much, bit over the head, but hey, if you've got any questions, yeah, feel free to reach out.
Sorry, just one last thing on
Sure.
that.
Yeah.
So if you've split the ownership,
Yep.
so it's 50-50,
Yep.
and then you both gift to a trust,
Yep.
the same trust, you can gift it incrementally over years at $27,000 each.
You can? Yep. You can, but just remember, when you apply for the residential care subsidy, the application, if there are two people, it's a joint application, even if only one of you need to go into care.
Oh, yeah.
And if you both give 27 each per year, that's a total of 54 per year. They'll claw back 27 for the purpose of
Right.
assessing your assets. So if you want to be conservative, as a couple, maximum gift 27 a year.
I'm just.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So hey, look. Yeah. Again, hopefully that topped up. Yeah. With the $6 and.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yes,
Good.
Thank you.
All the